All right, 11th grade, we are getting back into U.S. history today. We are starting a new unit, Unit 6, the Jeffersonian era. So, um, we left off last time with getting the nation started, and now we're kind of skipping ahead, past Washington and Adams' presidency. We'll briefly talk about them, but we're mainly going to talk about the Jefferson era. Washington did a lot of good for the country. During Adams' presidency, we start to see the beginning of factions and what will become the beginning of the political parties. And then we get to the election of 1800. So, in the summer of 1800, John Adams moved to the new national capital, the city soon to be known as Washington, D.C., and it was named in the honor of the first president, who had died in December of 1799. Adams stayed in the executive mansion, um, however, very brief. His main thing was he wanted to make peace with France. And so, um, Oh, I'm so sorry. I kind of flubbed up there. So Adams' stay in the executive office was very brief because he was only president for one term. His efforts to make peace with France divided his own party, and the Alien and Seditions Act, that was all about immigration, had energized his opponents. And the election of 1800 was one of the bitterest ever. The candidates, we have the presidential and vice presidential candidates for both parties were very nearly repeats of the 96 election. The Republicans chose Jefferson and Burr again, and the Federalists picked Adams and Pinckney. But this Pinckney was Charles Cotesworth Pinckney's brother of Thomas. So originally it was a Thomas Pinckney, now it's Charles Pinckney. Ridiculous accusations swirled between the two rival camps. Jefferson described the Federalist administration as a reign of witches. Federalists warned the public that if Jefferson were elected, that people could expect dwellings to be inflamed and and bloodshed type thing. So what were the results of this really mudslinging election? We saw the Federalist electors arranged to have one of their electors not vote for Pinckney in order to distinguish between their presidential and vice presidential candidates. So Adams received 65 electoral college votes, and his running mate Pinckney received 64. The Republicans should have imitated the Federalists. Instead, the Republicans electors each cast their votes for both Jefferson and Burr, giving them a tie at a 73 vote apiece. And as stipulated in the Constitution, the election was decided by the House of Representatives. So do you see what they did there? They basically, at that point, your vice president could be from a different party type thing. It was just the four people who had the most votes. So it was slightly different. We've changed that now through amendments, but at the time, the Federalists were pretty savvy. Wait, did I get that right? No, sorry, the Republicans. This is confusing. Sorry. The Republicans were savvy. No, the Federalists were savvy. Sorry about that. The Republicans did the 65-64. The Federalists were savvy, and the Federalists were the ones backing Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr. So then, because they had, so as stipulated by the Constitution, the election was decided by the House of Representatives. The Federalists controlled the House of Reps, and it was left to choose between two Republican candidates. And so, after a deadlock that lasted several days, Jefferson, considered to be slightly less repugnant than Burr, was elected president on the 36th ballot. Burr became his vice president. So soon after the election, the Republicans supported the 12th Amendment of the Constitution, and it called for electors to cast separate ballots for president and vice president. So this prevents a reoccurrence of all the complications that took place in the 1800 election. So when Jefferson took the oath of office, Adams did not stay to watch what he believed was the nation going up in ruin. After 30 years of public service, the old patriot returned home to Massachusetts to retire. Um, and contrary to his initial thoughts, the nation did not disintegrate once Jefferson was inaugurated. So let's get into Jefferson, the Jeffersonian era. In the first years of the 19th century, Washington, D.C. was as raw and unfinished of as the nation as a whole. The city was just getting developed. The country's leaders walked muddy paths that served as streets, from the ramshackle, overcrowded boarding houses in which they lived to the half-completed buildings in which they worked. On March 4th, 1801, Thomas Jefferson left his boarding house, strolled over to the unfinished Capitol, and took the oath of office as the third President of the United States. Then he delivered his inaugural address in a whispery, indistinct voice. Much of what he said was actually just lost to the audience. The simple ceremony would not have impressed the cultured rulers of Europe. But Jefferson was fine with them. He was tall, lanky president, always liked simple things, red-haired, peppered with gray, and he lived a very simple life. He soon offended the English ambassador by greeting him while wearing a pair of carpet slippers. On another occasion, the president astounded Washington society by taking his nephew shopping around the city. Though his habits were modest, he was certainly remarkable. And by 1801, his accomplishments included writing the Declaration of Independence, serving as the ambassador to France, and being governor of Virginia, and Secretary of State, and vice president. He also had developed numerous inventions and architectural designs by this point as well. Science was his true passion, he always said, but politics he felt were his duty. Science is my passion, politics my duty was his main mantra. So the administration of Jefferson and his handpicked successors, James Madison and James Monroe, constitute the era of the Jeffersonian republicanism. So this period bears Jefferson's stamp and embodies his philosophy through events ranging from the magnificent land purchase that doubled the size of the United States to the torching of the national capital by its foreign powers. Jefferson's principles endured in both prosperity and adversity during this period. Jefferson's party and philosophy stood virtually unopposed, and it was able to accomplish a lot in the American political landscape. So, we need to kind of look at what did he do domestically and what did he do internationally. Domestically, Jefferson wanted to reduce the size of the national government and support the farmer. He really wanted America to be a thriving agrarian society versus an industrial society. Internationally, he increased the prestige of the nation through the clash with the Barbary pirates, we know them, and the Louisiana Purchase. And he did this by sending Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to lead an expedition to explore the new lands with their guide, Sacagawea. And there is other ways to say her name. Sacagawea, I think is actually more accurate, but so I might use both ways. Just bear with me. So Republican ideas might best be understood in contrast to the ideas of Federalists. Just a second. So I want you to kind of add like what is the nature of these Republican ideas? So the Federalists were the party of finance, the great defenders of the merchant class. They believed that a strong merchant and manufacturing base was necessary for the nation to be free from outside interference. On the other hand, Jefferson believed that liberty in the United States would be preserved only as long as the country predominantly remained independent, self-sufficient, and agrarian, kind of like the self-sufficient farmer. He thought people were naturally good, which we know is not so, but cities and commercial activity often corrupted them. So the Republicans advanced the principle that less government less government is better. And Jefferson believed that a world of small governments without standing armies or debts was the ideal. Both parties wanted leaders who would govern with the common good in mind rather than the personal gain, but they differed on where those leaders should be found. The Federalists thought the government required the best individuals from the highest tier of society, finance, and trade. Republicans elected such men as Jefferson, who were intelligent, cultured, and accomplished individuals, but they defended the common man as any man's equal. With the best intentions, the Federalists overestimated the goodness of the upper class, and the Republicans overestimated the goodness of the common man. Jefferson was right, perhaps in seeing his election as a change, but it was no revolution. There was no wholesale repudiation of the Federalist method of governing. It was merely an alteration of the practices that were at hand. Jeffersonian republicanism is kind of a transitional transitional phase between the elitism of the Federalists and the more truly common man, Andrew Jackson, that would triumph in the mid 1820s. So when he took office, we know that there was the 12th Amendment, and then we're going to see a lot happen in the courts, actually. So we have the 12th Amendment under Jefferson. We also have the John Marshall Supreme Court. And I can't get into a lot of this now. You will hear more about this in government, but look up John Marshall, the Supreme Court. He did amazing things to make the Supreme Court the supreme body it is today. He was a Federalist, and he was actually cousin to Jefferson. Um, and he did a ton to make sure that how George Washington envisioned the Supreme Court actually happened. He actually served under Washington at Valley Forge, and he was wholeheartedly not about his state, but about his country after that winter at Valley Forge. So we're going to see that the Marshall case was all about we need to show our independence as a branch of government and establish a unified front. And so a lot of court cases that they did, they actually had a unanimous vote in one direction. We saw a lot of different cases like landmark Supreme Court cases like Marbury versus Madison, Gibbons versus Ogden, and McCully versus Maryland. Those are the three big ones. So you will learn more about those in government, but Marbury versus Madison, I want you to know, set up judicial review, which was the right of the court to declare a law unconstitutional. Marbury versus Madison established the principle of judicial review, the right of the court to declare a law unconstitutional. Gibbons versus Ogden ruled to protect the federal government's delegated powers. Delegated powers are those powers specifically given to the national government by the Constitution. So protected the federal government's delegated powers, those powers specifically given to the national government by the Constitution. And then McCully versus Maryland was all about implied powers. And those are powers that enable the government to carry out the delegated powers. Um, oh, sorry. I'm McCully versus Maryland was all about implied powers, which are the powers that aren't explicitly written, but they can be extracted from the Constitution. So let's quickly go into the Jefferson and foreign affairs. So despite his overriding concern for domestic affairs, that was really where his heart was. Jefferson achieved two successes in foreign affairs. Feel like That slide does not go with foreign affairs. So give me a minute. So we're going to stop there because I need to find my spot where I'm at in my notes. And I will keep you posted. Have a great day. We will pick up with the Battle of Fallen Timbers when we get back in video 2.